So I've talked to myself a little bit along the way, but not really that much. And the few times I did talk to myself, I said to myself, I need to keep up this conversation with myself a bit, but I haven't really done that. So here's my next attempt to try to do that. And it's for a few reasons. The other night I had a rapid slowing down in my brain, like one of those death experiences. And then I felt slow and kind of heavy and everything, and I'm feeling a bit better for sure. And I've been exploring relationship, and it's a blessing and really fun. And I'm also seeing that I've learned a lot how to manage my life by myself with this sort of bipolar thing, but when another person is in the picture, it's a totally different thing. And part of it is that it's really hard to explain how my brain works to another person. I've spent the last 2.5 years kind of explaining and unfolding and extrapolating my brain with myself. And then to be all of a sudden with somebody and try to explain that in a sentence is impossible. And sometimes it makes me flat, and sometimes it makes me energetically try to explain things or appear as defending myself. And it's challenging. And then other manifestations have happened where I start sharing my story and then literally sort of get cut off by saying, oh yeah, I was sharing how I was when I first got to California. And then it was said to me, yeah, she was interrupting everybody. And for me, I didn't experience it that way. I experienced it as my brain really speeds up sometime, and I'm not interrupting. I appear as interrupting, but my brain is just responding so fast that I just speak. It just comes out of my mouth. And I tried to explain that, and somehow when the opposite happens, when somebody explains like, I need a lot of time, can you give me some time to talk? I need extra time to say what I need to say. People are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But when somebody says, I don't need any extra time, I'm going to be like saying things really quick. As soon as I see what I say, I'm just going to be saying it. But when it's too fast, then that's kind of not okay. And there could be some truth to that. And there is some truth to that. And since then, I have slowed down a lot. And that was part of my point, is like, this is temporary. I'll be like this for a month or a week or a day or 2 weeks. I really don't know. And this place here with the energy and the fact that it's dialogue based gave me that open space to not only say what I quickly saw in terms of a perception, but also to try to quickly explain myself as to why I'm responding so quickly. And I did that quickly too, which just makes everything seem even more quick. And how do you explain that? And it was literally at times people like saying, be quiet, shut up. And you know, for myself, I know that's true, that a lot of people don't want to hear this. What I've said to myself over these years and the context I've built, it's not for everybody. And not only that, not everybody wants to hear what I have to say live in person when I'm interacting with them. And that's one of the reasons why I talk with myself, and I haven't as much lately. And I'm seeing that if I do, then I feel less need to explain myself. At least I didn't really feel that much need to explain myself or talk about this with other people in my daily life back home, because I had this relationship with myself. But then here, not only am I manifesting as different and, you know, capricious, up and down in mood, and even though I don't really experience moods per se, I experience these just really different behavior patterns depending on what's going on. To be in a community, like, again, because I haven't lived in community for a long time, people notice because there's different combinations of people around. So people notice that I'm being different because I was different an hour ago than I am now, or 5 minutes ago. Sometimes I'd be like, you know, you're my best friend and I love you and all this in dialogue. And then the next minute I'd be like 5 minutes later, I'd be like, but this part of my life is none of your business. So I'd manifest as like, I love you, blah, blah, blah. And then the next moment I'd be like, there's a part of my life that's none of your business. And putting up that firm boundary just as a result of how the dialogue was going. And people would be like, oh, how come you just were all lovey? And then the next moment you're like being so like harsh or whatever. I'm like, and before that I had just explained that I'm going to rapidly change from one manifestation to the next. And I said, I just explained this was going to happen, and then it happened. So, and then when I start saying things like that, it's like, you know, prophecy of myself, or it can get to the point where I'm writing prophecy about the world, because I can say what's going to happen and then it does for myself. But that can, and then that brings in the point of the power of the words that we use and what we say and what we talk about. And that's kind of the whole fundamental point of why I was talking with myself, because I realized the power of the human voice and body giving voice to what it is that one sees in the moment. It's not necessarily relevant the next, but with this speeding up of the brain, one can talk and talk and talk and talk. And that can manifest if one can eventually move into a place where they have an audience, you know, they share every day on YouTube or video, or, but if there's no audience, one doesn't really need an audience. One can talk with oneself on video, and that's the thing. The video doesn't interrupt. The video doesn't say, oh, you're being rude. Oh, stop talking. You're talking too fast. All these things that like psychiatrists or other people would say. This nice high-powered iPhone XS Max doesn't say any of that to me. So I can just talk and say whatever I would like. And what I would really like to say is what I wish. Like, what do I wish for my life? What do I wish? And by talking with myself, I've actually been able to live some of my dreams. And that's part of what I would like to share with other people is, hey, we have the technology. Take out your phone. If you don't have a really good phone, use the voice memos on your phone and just talk with yourself and try to make sense of things in your own voice and for yourself, for your own subjectivity. So I've developed this really wide subjectivity. And the other thing that's been happening for me is when I say things, people don't understand, how did I come up with that? Or they don't understand what I said because it's not really associated with anything that the person said, because my brain doesn't work based on association. It's not checking with different associations and coming up with the best association in its memory file bank. It's just seeing something and saying it from a different field. I don't know, who knows? There's a lot of different ways to look at it, but it moves really fast, and the speed, it makes other people uncomfortable for sure, because they don't understand where I'm getting that from. And then they start questioning like me, like, who are you? What are you? Blah, 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 all this stuff, because what I'm saying can't come from the knowledge bank of a self. Sometimes. Now I've gone more into that manifestation for sure in the last while, and it's nobody's fault. It's sort of, I had that peak of energy and now it's on a decline. So now I'm manifesting more as like kind of insecure, kind of like a bit jealous with my partner, and all these sort of self-manifestations. But I think there's a lot more to it than those basic things. What I'm seeing a bit is that I need to keep my relationship with myself, because what happens is I'm like, well, people aren't listening to me, or they're not interested in my story. It's not even a story. They're not interested in what I have to say. And that's okay. Most people aren't interested in what I have to say or what anyone else has to say. They're mostly interested in what they have to say. So why not say it to ourselves? And that's part of what I do, because I have a lot to say in general. when I share my story with people in like certain settings, I can talk for like an hour and a half, and I haven't even shared that much of it. So I can talk a lot, and I understand that. Other people need space to talk. I am also a really good listener, believe it or not, because I was trained as a peer support worker, and my job is to listen. And here, I'm not a peer support worker, I'm in a community. And what I've learned, I think, is that I would like my own space and to not live in community for a while, because I'm seeing that when one is around other people, it sort of invites the other person's stuff and projections into one's life. And one has to be able to have the strength to transmute that or deal with that in some way. And one can't escape from life, that's for sure. But basically what it comes down to is I want to create something to help people like me feel safe to go out and explore. And there are programs out there. There's Wellness Recovery Action Plan, which is really helpful. And there's also Bipolar in Order. I think there's a lot of good stuff there too. And Tom Wooten talks about getting to this freedom stage where one can function in all states. And I did take his class one time, even though he recommends repeating it over and over for like 2 years. I just took it once. I don't like to get into repetition and doing too much of one thing, because I can't remember. I don't want to repeat. So yeah, I don't really get into the space where I'm like, I need this path in order to help me anymore. And I do feel like what I'm seeing too with how I feel this trigger or attachment to someone close to me not being interested in my story, like literally being like, oh, you were being rude, and then saying to the person there, why don't you share your story? And it's happened like a number of times. So I'm questioning, do I need my partner to know my story? Do I want them to? Do I have a story? Is this an old story that needs to be dropped? This whole like mental health thing. If I am in this freedom stage of so-called bipolar, you know, now I'm free to sort of explore a relationship, but I don't know if I'm doing the greatest job. I was making my partner feel kind of like a bad person yesterday for like liking on Facebook and stuff. And I feel a little bit triggered by that, because for me, I like to use my phone for creative stuff. I'm helping somebody with like a GoFundMe campaign. I'm sending out stuff to friends back home who are struggling and trying to connect them with people because they have nobody over the holidays. I really feel like I use technology and it doesn't really use me. And so I just feel like I sort of saw how, you know, somebody's like, oh, I'm really tired. And then a few minutes later, they're looking at their phone, and like, then they look all like content, like this content look on the face, like, ah. And I almost felt like, wow, this technology is really making the brain so it can't act, and it almost, the body just feels tired. So a person will lay there and look at the phone. And I don't know if that's true, but I just really kind of was shocked, like, oh my goodness, this isn't benign, this constant checking of the phone. And I check my phone a lot too, but I'm not checking to like stuff. And this brings me to my own thing. It's not about anyone else. It's about how I want to create this thing to help move the body in actuality, instead of, you know, we're getting reduced to like this laying down and going like this. And that's an important thing to be able to do, and understanding how to use the phones and the technology really well and creatively is super important. But to use it in this sort of passive and trained mode is really dangerous, and it makes the body tired because it's just so habituated, and the brain is so habituated to looking at this little screen. And that's what I'm doing now, is looking at this little screen, but I'm moving my whole body. I'm not looking at a screen and going like this. I'm moving my body, I'm talking, I can see like the things that I put on my wrists to share with other people. And a woman came by the other day, and then I gave her a couple of these hair ties. I got the big bag of these hair ties, and I said, well, they're hair ties and they're kind of like friendship bracelets. So I gave her a few. And so that's sort of one of the gestures that I'm practicing with, is like gesture of like this friendship connection with a stranger. Like, I don't need to say, hey, can I add you to Facebook so you can look at my crap for the rest of your life? It could be more powerful to give out just a little gesture, instead of like, now you have to know all my psychological content for the rest of my life, or the rest of their life, or what have you. And one of the reasons I bought this iPhone is because it has like 500 gigabytes of memory. So I can like just create all this stuff and not worry about really running out of space. And I bought ashwagandha on Amazon Prime. And I already have this phenibut, which these two are part of Peter Smith's program to reprogram memories, and also passion flower, L-theanine, and something else like magnesium or B6. And he gives this sort of combination on his website, balancingbrainchemistry.co.uk, but he doesn't give the exact amounts. And he talks about this in terms of taking it and then going to psychotherapy to try to help reprogram memories. But since I have this relationship with myself, of talking with myself, I might try when they all are here to sort of take a combination of them and like go for a walk in the woods and talk with myself to sort of reprogram myself. And I don't know if it'll work, but I've been keeping that combination in mind as something to do, and it could be something interesting to try before I go back home in a month and a week. So that's the other thing. I'm feeling this pressure of, I have to create something or start the seeds of creating it. And it doesn't have to be big. It can be quite simple. And I feel like now, since I've been here, I understand where I'd like to start. I got to register the domain name, get the email, create a Basecamp account. And I'm just going to create little sections in Basecamp with different bits of information and help for people and things for creativity, and then just invite people to that. So it's a little community for people who have these sped up brains. Oh, something hit my stomach and I feel kind of ill. My guts have been really bad, like very loose for 2 months. I had like one solid BM yesterday, I think, and it was like the only one. So a lot of energy, a lot of detox. I might have to go eat a piece of bread or something to not vomit. I don't know what I was talking about, but I don't know if I said the part yet about how with these things that I'm being triggered with lately in relationship and with other people, because I'm in this lower energy state of sort of seeing things and relating them to me and making them about me and my story. What about me? So it's kind of this self-centered state. It's looking at the world from the center of the self, like the whole world has something to do with me, which is not true, but, you know, feeling like I need to be heard by somebody in particular denies the truth that I can be heard by myself on video, or, you know, I can look inward and inquire and figure stuff out for myself. And also, I have figured out a lot for myself to get me to this point. A lot of people who get diagnosed, they live a really hard life. And I do sometimes, but I've managed to live my dreams, and I need to keep that as a focus, like keep myself well enough to see Celine Dion. I've paid, you know, over $1,000 for that trip. And so yeah, the point is that I don't need help. It's lovely to have help. Like, I mean, I don't need help for myself. I've figured out the gestures and the vitamin thing, and I can do that pretty reliably. I got through it in June of this year, October of last year, which was hard, and another time before without the hospital. So I don't need the hospital. I did all by myself in June without anyone knowing anything was going on. So I don't need somebody to support me. But then when somebody's around, I feel like I need to be able to communicate more, because these things happen and then I have to explain, you know, oh, I'm in this lower energy state where I'm kind of selfish and insecure and all that. And usually I experience that and I'm sort of with it with myself, and I try to keep it to myself. But in a closer relationship, it's harder to do that. So how do I do that without making the other person into like a bad person, when really I'm feeling the bad personness of myself and projecting that outward onto other people? And I realized that that's what's being done. So yeah, there were a few things I did yesterday that I was like, oh, this isn't good. And then it makes me feel like being by myself until this crappy energy passes. But if I'm by myself, maybe I can create something. Instead of projecting in relationship, maybe in isolation, I can create something that can help people. Because I don't think people need help per se. I don't like that framework of even looking at people like they need help or my help. It's from that viewpoint comes like, I need to give you advice or tell you what to do. And I don't think that's quite right. But for me, I've shared, oh, this is what I've done. So I sort of want to share self-dialogue as a process, as a possibility. And also, you know, epigesturetics and harvesting one's mania or creativity. And I've talked about these things along the way, and I've sort of done it for myself to some extent, but I haven't put it into some kind of like concise thing that is watchable. And that's what I want to do next. To help people like me, because what I'm seeing here is I'm surrounded by people that aren't like me. They don't have a diagnosis of so-called bipolar. So they don't have this propensity to rapidly speed up. And I'm seeing how the people are very open and compassionate and everything, but they're still like, why are you doing that? Explain yourself. That's, you know, I've been called, I don't even remember the words because I'm not all about words and stuff, but rude, interrupting, like kind of arrogant, yeah, and a bunch of words that actually I would assume that any person who doesn't have a diagnosis of bipolar would project and label onto a person who has bipolar. Now, I still think being in relationship with a person and being called those names is better than being in relationship with a psychiatrist and being called delusional, psychotic, having hallucinations, you know, and stuck in a room with someone staring at you and drugging you. So this is definitely a big step in the right direction. And I actually take a lot of it as a compliment. Like, okay, I can see how I would be seen that way in the way I manifest, when here in this energy in California and where I am, there's kind of permission to manifest as so-called bipolar. But instead of people saying you need to go to the hospital, they're just like, you're being a bitch, or you're being rude, or you're being this or that. And a lot of the qualities in the heightened states of bipolar that people would say that we are, like rude, arrogant, a bunch of stuff like that, like capricious. It's better than bipolar probably, but that's how we appear to manifest, but that's not how we feel inside. We don't feel like I'm intentionally trying to be rude to you. It's more like my brain reacts so fast that I just speak so quick. I don't even plan it. It just, I only know I'm speaking when I hear myself speaking. And that can manifest as rude. But what I'm saying is, a lot of people with this label aren't really out in a community or in like this energetic community where really people aren't looking at me like I'm so-called bipolar. They're looking at me like I'm a person, but a bitchy, rude, arrogant person. And so it is actually a blessing, is what I'm trying to say. I'd rather be, and I'm in a community of say like 20 people or more, and it almost takes this community of 20 people who are in dialogue and open and studying certain spiritual philosophies to hold the space for like one bipolar person. Because, you know, think about how many clinicians and all that, and psychiatrists and doctors and pharmacists, and like a bipolar person has like a team of all these people with all this professional training of so many years, like probably 100 years of professional training. And then if you take into account the time it took for all that training to come into being, like there's just like hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hours of momentum of training to like keep this one so-called bipolar person alive in the world with their drugs and their clinicians and their appointments and there's no healing from psychosis, so only give this person drugs philosophy. Don't give them any type of counseling except like medication adjustment appointments. Here, I don't have any of that. I have a community of all these open people just being like, you're interrupting me and you're being a bitch. Or you seem like bitchy right now, which is kind of a mood. But for me, I feel clear, I feel quick, I feel sharp, I feel alive, I feel perceptive. So my experience of it is a certain thing, but how others experience me is different. And I am kind of different, and that's okay. And the thing that's been happening for me here is that I'm okay with the vast ways that I change in my manifestation, and it's not that I don't care what other people think, but if I start trying to guess what other people are thinking, then that I have to slow down a lot, because in order to sort of guess what other people are thinking, then I have to start playing these like mental machination games in order to start guessing what other people are thinking. And then back comes theory of mind and all this like acting based on social morality of like, oh, they're thinking this, so I should say that. And that's what slows us down. It's like this pre-planning and this premeditation of what we're saying based on what we think the other person's thinking. And for me, I kind of think that people aren't thinking anything. I think people aren't thinking anything about me until they tell me. And people have been telling me here for sure. And then it's challenging to listen to that feedback because I don't feel as much like questioning where other people are coming from. I don't say, oh, you're being too slow. But I also see a lot from what happened with this. Like there's so much to unfold here. Like in dialogue, by going so fast initially, it sort of created a crisis in people because they're like, I can't keep up, you're talking too fast. And then they get all like psychologically annoyed to the point that they almost get angry. And then it creates this sort of, that anger almost creates this quickening effect, because when we're angry, there's an emotion and then we can't think. And we start talking without thinking when we're angry. But then we say shit that we don't want when we're angry. But the actual point is to really start speaking without thinking. So by being annoying and making people angry, it actually starts to create a crisis in the person where they get angry. And then later on, they're like, whoa, I was really angry. And they're able to look at that anger more within themselves. So what I've learned for myself here, this time at least, is that I no longer need to go into a crisis myself, but how I am, if I'm really manifesting as myself, might kind of create a crisis in another person. It's really strange. Like I had this thing happen where somebody was like almost in a crisis and they were calling me mechanical. They were saying like, you're like a machine just like all the rest of us. And I said, speak for yourself. And then I did this like interpretive dance for like 10 seconds. And I was like, ooh, 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 like I'm not a robot, like here. And the person literally fell on the floor. Like, it's like they were blown away by this spontaneous, creative, nothing like doing, there's nothing there doing it. There's no self. And that was the thing. Like when people were trying to get me to explain myself, it created this self that was explaining itself, but there is no self. And how do you explain there's no self? But explaining creates the appearance of the self and then makes the other person feel comfortable that there's a self there explaining itself. It's this really weird thing. So there was this long phase. I'm talking about the last 2.5 months here, like just bits of it. There was this long phase of appearing to need to explain myself. And here, 2 people, like, where are you? Like some people are even calling me AI. Like, are you AI? Are you robot? That was kind of a bigger compliment than like a bipolar or something. But it is kind of like AI in a way, because not A, but intelligence, it's just really fast. Intelligence is fast. Thought-based, pre-planning, pre-programmed, precognitive processes are a lot slower. They're kind of like the speed of the contraction of the brain. Like, I don't know how fast the nerve impulses go. I should look that up. Like speed of nerve impulses versus the speed of light. Because not only that is, usually people respond to their own projection, like an image, which I think is sort of like this holographic, holophonic dust. Like these past memories are this like dust collection in the brain of like bits of holographic light. So there are people who think that the universe is sort of holographic. And I'm seeing that it's possible that the brain works on holograms because it can recall the past and imagine the future. And that's a holographic thing. And also, and that seems really fast. Like a hologram is not really there, so it can be recalled really fast. But the thing that creates the slowness is that the self that thinks that it's there is like a holographic, holophonic piece of dust. And then it looks at the next one, which is association. So it's associating with things. So it's the speed of association, which is kind of slow, because one thought is like a holographic, holophonic piece of dust is like this image of a memory, and then also the sound that goes with it, which is the thought, like, and then we hear that thought in our head, and then if it's a good one, we decide to say it. And that whole thing doesn't happen in so-called trance consciousness. It's, we're saying it at the same time that we see it. Like the flash of light is the sound that comes out, and that's a lot faster than a holographic, holophonic piece of dust looking at another one and then picking it. It's like a few times faster. So a person who has this speeded up brain can always get their word in quicker. They can always beat out the thought form, because they can see something a lot faster. And I feel that this is part of our role, is to speak, because we speak so quickly and from nothingness sometimes, that can sort of overwrite the thinking. And people don't like that, because thought really wants to be like, to have its opinions passed along. So it's really complicated, and it could be possible that words aren't sufficient, because a lot of this world is a war of words, and people with this trance conscious, they get into this poetic metaphoric consciousness, and then they're talking and other people are like, but I want to be heard in my story and blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of what's happening to me right now, is like, listen to my story. What about me? And it's kind of lame. So the blessing of being here and in relationship with people here and the energy is that I can really see what these things are doing, these thoughts and these processes. And I've been doing the reversing of it a bit, like Byron Katie does with her process of turn it around, which I don't really resonate with when I'm in this really heightened state, because things are just happening so fast. There's nothing to turn around. The turnaround happens when people come back at me and say, you're talking too fast. It's like feedback. You get the feedback from the universe, and that's the only thing you can rely on, is the feedback from the universe. But in the slower brain state, one takes things personally, and then if one takes something personally and records it as like, oh, this happened to me, and like, you didn't listen to my story, then now I can look at that inside. But when it's the speeded up process, it can only really be observed through feedback of the universe, which I was a little bit slow to take on in terms of slow down, but I couldn't slow down. Only the feedback could eventually slow me down. And that's sort of what happens to us when we go into so-called mania. We go out into the world, we're like really fast and we're moving in this fast speed in society, and then eventually society slows us down and we collapse and go into a psych ward or something. But we can learn to collapse without going to a psych ward. We can learn to rest, we can learn to slow down. And we don't even, like, I slow myself down with the epigestretics of vitamins and things. But I think I haven't really been slowing myself down with it. I've been taking a pretty consistent regime. And then sometimes not taking the extra speedy stuff like SAMe, tyrosine, and methylfolate and things. But I have been lately, because I think just providing all those nutrients gives the body a chance, and the situation and the way life manifests and unfolds, the opportunity to utilize those nutrients as the intelligence of the body sees fit. And I do adjust it slightly. Like I read through all my balancing brain chemistry notes and made notes of a few small adjustments I could do, like adding some tryptophan in the morning as well as at night to sort of keep me a little slower and support serotonin in the morning. I added zinc instead of at night only, breakfast, lunch, and dinner to sort of slow me down as well, just to, because I was doing more of like take all the sleepy stuff at night and the speedy stuff in the morning, but I think supporting all aspects during the day is helpful. So I've been doing that, and that's going well. I'll continue with that. And yeah, so there's so much to this, and I'm learning a lot, and I'm hoping that here it's allowing me to get clear and embody certain things. I've gotten clear about who I am in terms of my like sexuality, at least for now. I don't know, it could change. I have no idea. You can't predict these things. But then this other thing has happened, and I'll go into this next.